Tea Party and all of America has one goal, and it's this, that Barack Obama will be a one-term president.
Welcome back to Hardball. On Monday, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann is expected to announce she's running for president. But here she is in 2006 talking about evolution.
There is a controversy among scientists about whether evolution is a fact or not. Patty has reached a conclusion that evolution is a fact. There are hundreds and hundreds of scientists, many of them holding Nobel Prizes, who believe in intelligent design.
And just last week, after speaking at the Republican Leadership Conference, she said this: I support intelligent design. What I support is putting all science on the table and then letting students decide. I don't think it's a good idea for government to come down on one side of a scientific issue or another, when there is reasonable doubt on both sides. The science on evolution, in case you were wondering, is pretty unequivocal. But when Republicans deny scientific evidence on this and on issues like global warming, shouldn't they be called out? Bob Shrum is a Democratic strategist. David Korn is Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones magazine and an MSNBC contributor. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Bob, let me start with you. How disturbed should we be that a presidential candidate is talking nonsense?
Well, look, it's an indication of how far to the right the Republican Party has moved. This is flat earth ideology. Believe what you want and the facts be damned, along with all of us non-fundamentalists. When I was growing up, and I was taught in Catholic schools that there was nothing inconsistent between evolution and belief in God. Still, you know, God could use the evolutionary process in creation. Still, that was a matter of faith. That wasn't something you were taught as a fact. You could be taught it in Catholic schools, but not public schools. Michelle Bachmann and people like her and people who like her have a different mission. They want to vindicate the idea in the Bible that the world was created in 7 literal days a few thousand years ago. Most biblical scholars think that's nonsense. And they ignore all the geological evidence. You know, it reminds me, during the Scopes trial in Tennessee in the 1920s, when that state outlawed the teaching of evolution, William Jennings Bryan, who was speaking for outlawing evolution, was testifying for it, was representing the state, was put on the stand by Clarence Darrow, and he was asked about the fact that the rocks that Darrow was showing him were thousands of years older than his theory would allow, and he looked at Darrow and he said, frankly, I am more interested in the Rock of Ages than the Age of Rocks. And that's what's going on here. You have that a kind of coup in the Republican Party of people of that kind taking over.
David, let me repeat something that Michelle Bachmann said here. She says, there's a controversy among scientists about whether evolution is fact. Hundreds and hundreds of scientists, she says, many of them holding Nobel Prizes, believe in intelligent design. None of that is true. Is she just ignorant, or is she deliberately misleading people?
That's a really good question, and I think you'd have to have her on the show and probe her. But I'm shocked that you, Ron, are shocked. I mean, not only does she go on about...
I'm not really shocked, I'm just outraged, David.
Okay, well, fine, I'll grant you that. But, you know, in addition to this, you mentioned that she believes global warming is a hoax. She has said also in the past that almost all gays and lesbians have been abused as children. That's why they're homosexual. She has said that the Founding Fathers worked tirelessly to end slavery. When that wasn't true, they kicked the can down the road. I mean, it seems that either ignorance or historical revisionism is really her stock in trade. Now, that's obviously for partisan appeal. It may actually be what she believes, which would indicate a certain detachment from reality. But perhaps the scary thing is that such detachment has gotten her pretty far in politics and may serve her very well in places like Iowa.
Indeed. Bob, here's what really disturbs me about this. I know that some people's eyes glaze over when you talk about evolution, but it seems to exist, this kind of positioning seems to exist on a continuum for me. All right, you deny evolution, then you deny global warming, then you're talking about birtherism, and suddenly you're claiming that when you cut taxes, you actually raise revenues. It's this sort of, you know, disdain for reality that disturbs me, I guess.
Well, Ron, I think that's absolutely right. Look, it's a flat earth earth ideology that goes across the board. On economics right now, you're seeing Boehner and company trying to argue that the way to help a faltering economy is to take demand out of it so that people buy less, companies produce less, and employers hire fewer workers. You know, the interesting thing, if you look at Romney and Huntsman, they're deeply suspect in the Republican Party because they refuse to deny the science of climate change, even though, of course, they don't want to do anything about it. They're trying to split the difference to satisfy the base. But it would be terrifying, I think, for us and for the world, for someone like Michelle Bachmann ever to become president of the United States. I suspect that secretly in the White House, they might actually be rooting for her to be the Republican nominee. Maybe even not so secretly.
Yes, indeed. Well, you know, David, somebody had a conversation not too long ago with a diplomat from China, and they got talking about global warming. And the American asked the Chinese diplomat, he said, "Are you having this argument in China about global warming?" And he just sort of laughed and shook his head, and he said, "No, you know, our leadership comes from science and engineering mostly, so no, we're not having that conversation anymore." We never really had that conversation because they understand science.
I mean, Bob made an important point a moment ago. The scientific debate on global warming is over. And in fact, it was even acknowledged by the Bush administration, George W. Bush. Right. He ended up coming up with a voluntary system that really addressed the issue. But he and everyone who worked for him said that it's real. People who are, you know, Sarah Palin used to say it was real. You have Plenty and Mitt Romney, who both took actions as governor, who said it was real. But we now live in this sort of fact-free political media environment where people can get away with just denying things and saying, hey, there are two sides to every issue. It's what you just said about creationism. You know, there's a scientific debate. On one side, there are 3 scientists. On the other side, there are 3 million scientists. So let's have a debate.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, but you know, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to ask Bob if he thinks that it is useful and, well, fair, but certainly useful to question presidential candidates about issues like evolution to kind of, you know, suss out their mindset about this.
Well, you don't have to question Michelle Bachmann. For her,
she just comes right out.
No, this is for her a point of the lance. She is appealing to the religious right in Iowa. Her whole strategy is to launch herself there, survive in New Hampshire, get to South Carolina, and do the same thing. I think the viewpoint is very distinctly a minority one in America, but she might just take off, and if the Republican Party completely loses its head, they might nominate her. Sure, we should question her. She'll be eager to give her answers. Her answers will be entirely fact-free.
David, Bob mentioned that this is a minority opinion in America, but here's the scary thing. Yeah. If you look at polls, consistently between 40 and 50% of Americans, a Gallup poll from December asked about evolution and creationism, 40% saying, no, God created man in his present form, in other words, no evolution. 40% is a pretty big number in this country. What are the consequences to a nation when not only their leaders, but people themselves simply deny reality?
Well, you probably end up with not the right policies to deal with the challenges of the future. If you know, the first step to making progress in anything, whether it's in your personal life, your social life, or as a nation in communal activity, is diagnosing reality accurately and then coming up with prospective actions to deal with it. So if you have Americans in denial about global warming or about creationism, it's a problem. More so on the former than the latter. I mean, people can deny evolution, and it doesn't necessarily lead to bad economics or bad climate policy. But I would also, those polls are interesting too, because I think if you start asking people sort of more detailed questions. Do you really believe that Fred Flintstone lived with the dinosaurs? Do you really believe the world's not older than 6,000 years? And sort of break it down. I think people like, to them, creationism just says God created everything fine, and at one level they do accept that, those 40, 50%. But if you get into details, I think the true creation fanatics, if you can call them that, are a smaller minority, but yet they still are probably a big voting bloc in Iowa, which is what Michelle Bachmann is counting on.